The billionaire froze in the middle of the street when his twin children suddenly let go of his hands, ran through the falling snow, and threw themselves into the arms of a homeless woman. Then the little boy looked up at her with tears streaming down his face and whispered, "Mommy, you finally came back." The woman stared at the children in shock, because she had never seen them before in her life. And what the billionaire discovered later that night would completely change all of their lives forever. Snow fell softly over Manhattan, covering the streets in white as Christmas lights shimmered through the freezing night. Ethan Calloway tightened his grip on his twins' small hands as they walked past crowded stores and glowing restaurants. People recognized him everywhere. The billionaire tech founder who had built a billion-dollar empire before turning 40. But none of that mattered tonight. Not when the mansion waiting for him felt emptier every year. Not when his children still cried for a mother who would never come home again. "Daddy, look," whispered Lily. The little girl suddenly stopped walking. Across the street, curled beside a closed bakery, sat a young woman wrapped in a thin gray coat. Snow covered her shoulders. Her trembling hands pressed against her face as she tried to stay warm beside a flickering streetlight. People walked past her without even looking. Ethan glanced for only a second before lowering his eyes. Again, he had seen scenes like this too many times in New York. Sad, but normal. "Come on, kids," he said quietly, but neither child moved. The twins stared at the woman as if they had seen a ghost. Then suddenly, "Mommy!" Before Ethan could react, both children ripped their hands from his and sprinted across the street. "Lily, no!" Ethan shouted. Cars honked as the twins ran through falling snow toward the terrified woman on the sidewalk. The young woman looked up in panic just as the little boy threw his arms around her waist. "Mommy, you came back!" Noah sobbed. The girl hugged her next, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Ethan froze. For a moment, the entire city seemed to go silent around him. The woman looked completely overwhelmed. "I think you have the wrong person," she whispered shakily. But the twins clung tighter. "No," Lily cried. "It's you. It's really you." People nearby slowed down to stare. Ethan hurried across the street, his heart pounding harder with every step. Up close, he finally saw her face clearly. Young, pale from the cold, exhausted. But her eyes, something about them made his chest tighten painfully. For one impossible second, she reminded him of his late wife. Not exactly, but enough to make breathing difficult. "I'm so sorry," Ethan said quickly, gently pulling the twins back. "They lost their mother 3 years ago." The woman looked down at the children, tears filling her eyes despite clearly not understanding what was happening. "It's okay," she whispered softly. Noah grabbed her freezing hand. "Please don't go." Again, the woman's lips trembled. Ethan noticed how cold her fingers were. She had no gloves. No scarf. Nothing, except an old backpack sitting beside her in the snow. And then he saw it. Her shoes. The soles were nearly falling apart. Something inside him cracked. The billionaire looked away for a second, ashamed that his children were wearing $1,000 coats while this woman was freezing alone outside. "You can't stay here tonight," Ethan finally said. The woman immediately shook her head. "I'm fine." "You're shaking." I said I'm fine. But her voice broke halfway through the sentence. The cold wind swept down the street. Lily slowly reached into her own coat pocket and pulled out a small pair of pink gloves. "My mommy used to warm my hands," she whispered. Then she gently placed the gloves into the woman's trembling hands. And for the first time in years, Ethan saw tears fall from his daughter's eyes without anger behind them. The young woman stared at the gloves silently. Then she began to cry to end right there. In the middle of a freezing New York night, a broken billionaire realized this stranger might be the first person who had made his children feel safe. Since their mother died, Ethan had invited countless powerful people into his home over the years. Presidents, celebrities, billionaires. But somehow, the woman sitting silently in the back seat of his car that night made him more nervous than all of them combined. Snow tapped softly against the windows as the city lights blurred outside. The twins refused to let go of her hands, even after 20 minutes, even after she gently told them 3 different times that she was not there. "Mother, it's okay," Lily whispered softly. "You don't have to pretend anymore." The woman lowered her eyes, clearly heartbroken. Ethan watched her carefully from the driver's mirror. She looked exhausted. Not dangerous. Just broken. "What's your name?" he finally asked. The woman hesitated. "Claire." "No last name. No explanation. Just Claire." When they arrived at the Calloway mansion, Claire froze at the sight of the enormous gates opening slowly before them. Her face immediately filled with panic. "There's been a mistake," she said quickly. "I can't go in there." "You're not sleeping outside in this weather," Ethan replied calmly. "I'll leave in the morning. You can leave whenever you want." Claire looked down at her worn shoes, embarrassed to even step onto the polished marble floor when the doors opened. The twins didn't care. The moment she entered the mansion, they pulled her inside excitedly, like children bringing home someone they loved. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel cold anymore. Mrs. Harper, the elderly housekeeper, nearly dropped a tray when she saw the children laughing. Actually laughing. She looked at Ethan in complete shock. "I haven't heard that sound since." She stopped herself. "Since their mother died." Claire noticed the sadness immediately. "You don't have to do all this for me," she said quietly. But before Ethan could answer, Noah suddenly tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy used to sing when we couldn't sleep." The room fell silent. Ethan's chest tightened. For 3 years, the twins had refused to talk about their mother out loud. Therapists had tried. Doctors had tried. Nobody could get them to open their hearts again. Until tonight. Claire slowly knelt beside the little boy. "I'm not your mommy," she whispered gently. Noah's lip trembled. "I know." The answer stunned everyone in the room. The little boy looked down at the floor. "But you feel warm like her." Claire covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Even Ethan had to look away. Something about hearing those words from his son shattered him completely. Inside. Later that night, after the twins finally fell asleep in the guest room beside Claire's bed, Ethan stood alone in his office staring at an old photograph of his wife, Sophia Calloway, the love of his life, gone in a car accident 3 winters ago. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked toward the security monitor showing Claire asleep in the guest room chair beside the children. Then suddenly Mrs. Harper entered quietly, holding a small object in her hand. "I found this inside her backpack while drying her clothes," the old woman said softly. Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Without a word, Mrs. Harper placed the silver necklace onto his desk. The moment Ethan saw it, the color drained from his face, because hanging from the chain was a tiny moon-shaped charm identical to the one Sophia wore the night she died. A necklace that was never sold in stores. A necklace Ethan himself had custom-made years ago. And somehow, this homeless stranger was wearing the exact same one. Ethan barely slept that night. Long after the mansion had gone silent, He remained alone in his office staring at the silver moon necklace lying on his desk. Sophia's necklace. Or at least, an impossible copy of it. His mind raced through 1,000 explanations. Maybe Claire had stolen it. Maybe someone recreated the design. Maybe it was all some strange coincidence. But deep down, none of those answers felt right. Because Ethan remembered the night he gave that necklace to his wife. There had only been one ever made. One at sunrise. Ethan quietly walked toward the guest room. The door was slightly open. Inside, the twins were still asleep beside Claire, curled up against her like children afraid she might disappear if they let go. Claire herself sat awake near the window, staring out at the falling snow. She looked exhausted, like someone carrying years of pain alone. "You're up early," Ethan said softly. Claire flinched slightly, clearly embarrassed to have been caught awake. "I didn't want to fall asleep completely," she admitted. "Why?" Her eyes moved toward the twins. They looked scared. The answer hit Ethan harder than expected. 4 years. Nannies had come and gone through this house. None of them noticed the fear hidden inside his children. But Claire noticed. Immediately, Ethan stepped closer and carefully placed the necklace onto the small table beside her. The moment Claire saw it, her face lost all color. "Where did you get this?" Ethan asked quietly. Claire stared at the necklace in horror. Then suddenly stood up. "I should leave." Ethan blocked the doorway. "Not until you tell me the truth." Claire's breathing became uneven. "I don't know anything about that necklace. You're wearing the exact same one my wife had before she died." Claire froze for several long seconds. She said nothing. Then finally, "My mother gave it to me." Ethan frowned. "What?" "She gave it to me before she died when I was 16. Ethan's heart pounded. "That's impossible." Claire shook her head desperately. "I swear to you, I'm telling the truth." The room suddenly felt smaller. He studied her face carefully again. The same soft eyes, the same gentle expression. Even the way she tilted her head reminded him painfully of Sophia. Something terrifying slowly began forming inside his mind. "What was your mother's name?" he asked quietly. Claire hesitated. "Elizabeth." Ethan immediately shook his head. "No." Claire looked confused. "My wife never had a sister." Silence. Then Claire whispered something so softly Ethan almost didn't hear it. "She wasn't her sister." Ethan's stomach dropped. Claire lowered her trembling eyes. "She was adopted." The words hit the room like thunder. Ethan stared at her in complete disbelief. Sophia had once told him she spent time in foster care as a child, but she almost never talked about it. "Too painful," she said. Claire slowly reached into her old backpack and pulled out a faded photograph, then handed it to him with shaking fingers. Ethan looked down and nearly stopped breathing. In the old photo stood two little girls smiling at the camera. One was clearly Sophia as a child, and beside her was Claire. "You knew my wife," Ethan whispered. Claire's eyes filled with tears. "She was my older sister." At that exact moment, a small sleepy voice suddenly came from the doorway. "Daddy." Ethan turned sharply. The twins were standing there, and Noah looked directly at Claire before quietly saying, "I told you Mommy sent her." The mansion felt different after the truth came out. Not louder, not happier. Just softer. For the first time in years, Ethan could hear footsteps in the hallways without feeling haunted by silence afterward. Claire stayed. At least for a few more days. Mostly because the twins begged her not to leave, but also because deep inside, she needed answers too. Answers about Sophia, about the sister she had lost long before Ethan ever met her. That afternoon, snow continued falling outside while Claire sat quietly in the mansion library staring at old family photographs spread across the table. Sophia smiling on a beach. Sophia holding newborn twins. Sophia laughing beside Ethan at Christmas. Claire touched one picture gently with trembling fingers. She looked happy, she whispered. Ethan stood near the fireplace watching her carefully. She was, he answered softly. Claire lowered her eyes. She stopped writing to me after she got married. Ethan frowned slightly. What do you mean? Claire hesitated, then slowly reached into her backpack again. This time, she pulled out a bundle of old letters tied together with faded blue ribbon. They were all returned and opened. Ethan stared at the envelopes. Every single one had Sophia's old address written on the front, but none had ever been opened. His chest tightened. That's impossible. Claire swallowed hard. She thought I abandoned her. Ethan stepped closer. What happened between you two? For a moment, Claire said nothing. Then finally, when Sophia turned 18, a wealthy family adopted her. Ethan listened silently. She begged them to take me too. Claire's voice cracked. But they only wanted one child. The room suddenly felt colder. Claire looked down at her hands. She cried the entire night before she left. Ethan could almost picture it. A frightened young Sophia forced to leave her little sister behind. She promised she'd come back for me someday, Claire whispered. A tear slid down her cheek, but she never did. Ethan's heart ached hearing the pain in her voice, because he knew Sophia. And Sophia would never willingly abandon someone she loved. Never. Something's wrong, Ethan muttered quietly. Claire looked up. Before either of them could speak again, Mrs. Harper suddenly appeared in the doorway holding a dusty storage box. I found this while cleaning the attic, the old housekeeper said. Ethan barely glanced at it, but Claire froze instantly, because written across the top in faded ink were two words, for Claire. The room went completely silent. Ethan slowly opened the box. Inside were dozens of unopened letters. Photographs. Birthday cards. Small gifts, all addressed to Claire. Claire's hands began shaking violently. No, she whispered. Ethan grabbed one envelope carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sophia's. Claire broke down crying before he even opened the first letter. With trembling fingers, Ethan unfolded the yellowed paper and quietly began reading out loud. Dearest Claire, if you're reading this, then somehow these letters finally found you. I never stopped looking for you, not even once. Claire cried harder than she ever had in her life. Not because Sophia was gone, but because, for the first time in years, she realized her sister had never stopped loving her. Letter after letter covered the library table. Some were stained with tears. Others had little photographs tucked inside. Birthday cards. Christmas notes. Even tiny drawings from Noah and Lily when they were babies. Sophia had written to Claire for years, but none of it had ever reached her. Claire wiped her trembling eyes as Ethan quietly read another letter aloud. Claire, if I ever find you again, I want you to meet my children first, because I already know they would love you. Claire covered her mouth and sobbed out across the room. Little Lily slowly walked toward her. Then climbed gently into her lap. It's okay, the little girl whispered. Claire wrapped her arms around her tightly, crying into her hair. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The snow continued falling softly outside the mansion windows. And somehow, the house no longer felt haunted. Later that night, after the twins fell asleep, Ethan stood alone beside the grand staircase watching Claire place Sophia's letters carefully back into the box. You should stay, he said quietly. Claire looked up immediately. I can't. Why not? She forced a sad smile. Because this isn't my world. Ethan stepped closer. You think money makes this a different world? Claire lowered her eyes. You're Ethan Calloway. And you think that means I'm not lonely? The question caught her off guard. For the first time since meeting him, Claire truly looked at the man standing in front of her. Not the billionaire. Not the famous businessman. Just a grieving husband trying to hold his broken family together. Ethan glanced upstairs toward the twins' bedrooms. They haven't slept peacefully in 3 years, he admitted softly. Then his voice cracked. Until you came. Claire's eyes filled again. You don't need me. Ethan shook his head slowly. No. He looked directly at her. They do. Silence filled the space between them. Warm, gentle, real. Then suddenly small footsteps echoed down the staircase. Noah stood there holding his blanket with sleepy eyes. Are you leaving? He whispered. Claire immediately knelt beside him. I don't know yet. The little boy stared at her for several seconds before quietly asking, Did Mommy send you here because we were too sad? Claire completely broke down. She pulled him into her arms as tears streamed down her face. And for the first time since Sophia died, Ethan heard his son laugh softly again. Weeks later, on Christmas morning, sunlight poured through the mansion windows while wrapping paper covered the living room. Noah and Lily laughed loudly beside the tree. Mrs. Harper smiled in the kitchen, and Claire stood quietly near the fireplace wearing a new winter coat Ethan had given her. Not as charity, but as family. Ethan walked toward her holding a small velvet box. Claire looked confused. What's this? Open it. Inside was Sophia's silver moon necklace. Claire's breath caught instantly. She would have wanted you to have it, Ethan said softly. Claire looked down at the necklace with trembling hands. Then Ethan added quietly, and I think she wanted us to find each other. Tears filled Claire's eyes again. Not tears of sadness this time, but something warmer, something that felt like home. Behind them, the twins suddenly ran forward and wrapped their arms around both of them at once. And standing there together, beside the Christmas tree, the broken pieces of one shattered family finally began to heal.